What if everything you call routine is just a repetition of something you refuse to accept? What if behind a simple bus ride there is a secret so deep that even death could not erase it? Get ready. What you are about to hear will make you rethink every trip you have ever taken on public transport. It was common for me to leave home every day at 4:30 a.m. promptly, heading to the bus stop at the end of my street. There, I would wait for my transport, bus 8920, which would take me to my destination. I worked as a production assistant at a large food company as a packer, 8 hours a day. I would start at 8 a.m. and finish at 4 p.m. I would waste about 4 hours of my day on public transport alone, but I didn't mind that much. Jobs were scarce, and I couldn't afford to trade a sure thing for a dubious one. The bus that took me to my destination every day ended up becoming part of my routine. It always came at the same time and was practically empty. Since my house was very close to the final stop, most of the time I was the first passenger to board. That was the first day I saw her, sitting on the last seat of the bus near the window. A woman of about 30 years old. She was wearing a striped dress in shades of gray and white sneakers with discreet details. I went through the turnstile after greeting the driver, who had already become my friend. I sat near the door because I knew the bus would soon be full. I took out my cell phone, but not to check social media or anything like that, just to watch that woman through the reflection of the screen, sitting still, attentively observing the street without blinking. I was intrigued by her gaze. She seemed to contemplate the road with a kind of nostalgia. Soon the passengers began to fill the bus, and I could no longer see the woman who was hidden behind the people. Since I was getting off at the last stop, which was in front of the factory, I just kept paying attention to which stop she would get off at. I arrived at my destination, but she hadn't gotten off yet. So I stood up and looked at the back of the bus, but she was no longer there. I had missed the moment she got off. I worked all day, and every now and then, I found myself thinking about that woman. I had no idea why, but she had really caught my attention. Maybe because I had never seen her on that bus, or even because of her elegant clothes. People from that neighborhood didn't usually dress so well to go to work, especially so early. My routine remained the same for several weeks. Only now every morning, that woman was sitting on the same bench, in the same position, and wearing the same clothes. I felt like saying good morning to her, but she never turned her head. I always sat in the same place, but that day I decided to change seats. I sat right in front of her. I was curious to know where she got off, but up until that moment, I hadn't found out. I only knew that it was before me, because when I got up to get off, she was no longer there. Finally, I saw her. She got off 2 stops before me, near a large cemetery in the area. In a way, seeing her get off gave me some relief, because I was already getting embarrassed by the fact that I would see her on the bus and never get off. My co-workers already knew the story of the elegant and mysterious passenger. They wanted me to describe her face, but I had never seen that woman from the front, only from the side. She had never once looked at me. It was as if I didn't exist on that bus every day. After so much insistence, I decided that I would discreetly photograph her the next day. I came up with a whole plan in my head so that I could accomplish the feat and show my colleagues the woman in question. At 4:30 in the morning, I walked down my street quickly. With everything planned out, I would sit on the seat in front of her and pretend to take a selfie. Without a shadow of a doubt, she would appear in the photo. I greeted the driver, got in, and there she was. I sat on the seat and immediately raised my cell phone. I took several photos, hoping that she would look at the camera, but she didn't. Outraged by the complete disregard, I put my cell phone in my bag and started a conversation with a young man who sat next to me. I thought about commenting on the woman in the back seat, but she would surely hear and it wasn't classy. I no longer knew why I was thinking about her so much. I tried to divert my thoughts, but it was impossible. I spent the whole day praying for the next day to come so I could see her on the 8920 bus. As always, she got off the bus. I tried to get close to the window to see which way she was going, but it was so crowded that I could barely move. I went into the company, put on my uniform, and went to work. I hadn't had enough time to look at the photos on my cell phone. I would do that at lunchtime. My colleagues surrounded me even before I took the device out of my bag. They were all very curious because they were already talking about the woman as if they knew her intimately. They were already treating her as the one who had stolen my heart. I took out my cell phone and went to the gallery, carefully checking each image. But incredibly, only I was in the photos. I couldn't explain what had happened. They were very angry with me for thinking that I didn't want to show them the woman. I simply had no explanation to give. At least 10 photos were taken, and she was there, in all of them. How can I explain it? I felt uneasy. I wasn't crazy, much less a liar. I said I didn't know what had happened and that I would try again the next day. Each time that woman intrigued me more. More anxious than usual, I wanted the next day to come quickly. I barely slept that night. I got on the bus and sat next to her that day. I had decided to start a conversation, but I didn't have the courage to start talking. For a while, I remained silent, just smelling the perfume she gave off. It was feminine, floral, enveloping, with an amber base and a touch of vanilla. I had smelled that perfume before, but I didn't know where. I tried for a few minutes and timidly started a conversation. "Good morning." I didn't get an answer. I risked it again. "Good morning. It's been a long time since we've been taking the bus together every day, and we haven't even said good morning to each other." Once again, I didn't get an answer. I took that as a huge disappointment and decided to sit on the bench as usual. I took out my phone, raised my arms as if I was going to take a selfie, and finally managed to see her face. I was shocked. There were so many scars. The biggest one was a cut that went from near the corner of her left eye to the corner of her mouth, which made her lip crooked. It seemed like she only smiled with one side of her face, but she had a placid and deep look. Another large scar was on her right eyebrow, causing a huge gap in her eyebrow. There was another below her right eye, which made her eye small. I felt very sorry for her at that moment, and I imagined that she always looked outside because she didn't want to be seen. Her intention was to avoid unnecessary stares and comments. I didn't take the photo. I just decided that I wouldn't work that day. I was going to follow her. As soon as she got off, I discreetly went down too. I followed her every step, trying to hide behind every streetlight that appeared. Soon I saw her enter the cemetery. I found it strange. Did she work there? Administrative assistant? Her impeccable clothes said so. I started following her. She walked into the middle of the cemetery, and as soon as I looked back, having heard a strange noise, she disappeared. I felt a shiver run down my spine. A sudden wind began to shake the treetops, and a chilling whistle took over the entire cemetery.
I ran outside as fast as I could. My heart felt like it was going to jump out of my mouth. What was that? I wasn't going to stay there to find out. No way. If I ran, I would still be on time for work. That's what I did. When I got close to the company's door, there was a strange commotion. People with signs demanding punishment. I didn't understand anything. I walked past them and went inside. I noticed that some of the signs had pictures, and some people were wearing white shirts, also with pictures of people. I used the excuse that I had been a little late because of the commotion on the street. I asked why, but before I could explain, the supervisor came to rush us and give us a huge scolding. We were late and the orders weren't waiting, and the explanation would have to wait until lunchtime. The mood was heavy that day. I didn't know the reason, but for me, it had been the story of the cemetery. I already imagined that woman was some kind of ghost. Every time I thought about it, I got goosebumps. The hours passed slowly, but finally lunchtime arrived. I wanted to tell them about my strange experience and find out what the demonstration was about. First, I told them everything that had happened, how I was ignored, the scars, the cemetery. My colleagues crossed themselves and told me not to take that bus again, that it could only be a ghost. It was very surreal. Although I felt the same way, I was just getting carried away by the emotion. I lost sight of the woman because I looked back, and the wind and the whistling were common in open spaces. She was real. She even had perfume on. I decided to change the focus of the conversation and find out about the demonstration. According to the stories, a few years ago, the bus that stopped in front of the factory, the 8920, the same bus I took every day to get to work, lost control and crashed into the factory, killing almost all the passengers. The factory caught fire, and many employees were burned to death because there was no operating license. The people outside were demanding their rights, their compensation for the dead, which had never been paid. That had happened 10 years ago. It was the anniversary of the deaths of all those people. That gave me goosebumps. A sick feeling took over me. The bus I rode every day, the woman, was she really a ghost? Was she inside that bus that caused the accident that took so many lives? I was going to follow her once again. I needed to know what that was. If she really was a ghost, why was I seeing her? My mind was disturbed by that whole story. I went home and once again I couldn't sleep. I made a plan again. I knew the driver. I was going to ask him to let me get off through the front door so I wouldn't be seen, and I was going to follow that woman or ghost. It was still early morning, and that day everything was even more foggy. There wasn't even a hint of light in the sky. A light drizzle was falling insistently, and it was unusually cold for that time of year. It was November. Usually the sun started to shine around 5 in the morning. It was 4:45 when I saw the headlights approaching the stop. I got in, greeted the driver, and asked if I could get off through the front door that day. He agreed. I looked back, and there was the woman. After an hour and a half on the bus, the doors opened with the usual noise and I got off. I already knew the route. I knew where that woman was going. This time, I wouldn't take my eyes off her for any noise. I was going to find out if she was real or just a ghost. I walked among the graves, following each step carefully. Finally, she stopped. She knelt down and began to cry uncontrollably. Her sobs could be heard from a distance. It broke my heart. I approached slowly, turned around and stood behind her a little far away. I fixed my eyes on the tombstone. For whom was that woman crying so much? My body trembled. Was that my photograph on that grave? Was I dead and buried there? How? My whole body began to burn. An unbearable pain took over me. I howled like an animal, such was the pain I felt. Suddenly, everything came back to me. She and I. We were husband and wife. We worked in the same factory. We left at 4:30 in the morning. We took the 8920 bus that fateful day. We sat on the last bench holding hands. We were happy and in love. The driver was drunk. My wife had called him out several times on the way. The bus was packed. It didn't stop. It went straight into the factory and exploded. My wife was thrown far away, but I couldn't get out. I burned to death inside the bus, inside the factory where we worked. She survived. I'm the ghost, not her. Since then, she's been coming to the cemetery every day before going to work. Those clothes, that perfume, that's what she was wearing the day of the accident. I've never been able to rest. I've been taking the same route for 10 years. I meet the driver and all my dead friends, both on the bus and in the factory. The difference is that now I see them exactly as they are, rotten, misshapen, and very angry. Now that I know everything, I'll never leave the 8920 until I take it with me. I'll board this vehicle day after day. An accident. Who knows what a soul in pain and burning with grief can do? Until I find out, my home will be the 8920 line.